There are moments in a life that announce themselves. A graduation, a funeral, a first love, a goodbye. You recognize them while they're happening, because the world pauses long enough to let you understand that something has changed. But the moments that alter you the most never introduce themselves. They arrive disguised as ordinary days, an ordinary conversation, an ordinary silence, an ordinary person. Then, months later, you look back and realize the version of you that existed before that moment no longer exists. That's where this began. Not with you, with me, long before our paths ever crossed, long before either of us became aware of the other. I've always lived as though my inner world belonged behind locked doors. Not because I distrusted people. Distrust is simple. This was something quieter, something older. I learned very early that people don't just misunderstand what they cannot reach. They recreate it. They replace mystery with assumptions, complexity with convenience, depth with labels that make them feel comfortable. They don't mean to. Most of them genuinely believe they're understanding you. But understanding isn't the same as accuracy. And accuracy has always mattered more to me than acceptance. I'd rather be unseen than be seen incorrectly. So I adapted, not dramatically, not in ways anyone would notice. I simply became careful. Careful about what I revealed, careful about what I explained, careful about which thoughts deserved language, and which ones were safer remaining silent. Eventually, it became effortless. People believed they knew me. I let them believe it, because correcting every misunderstanding is exhausting. Sometimes it's easier to let people carry an incomplete version of you than to spend your life proving you're more than their imagination allows. Years passed like that. Conversations happened. Friendships formed. People came close enough to believe they had reached the center. None of them realized they had only reached another doorway. There was always another room behind the one they entered, another layer beneath the one they recognized, not because I enjoyed hiding, because some truths lose their shape the moment they're exposed to people who aren't prepared to carry them, so I became fluent in partial visibility, divital enough to exist. Invisible enough to remain intact. It was peaceful, predictable. Nothing surprised me anymore. Human behavior follows patterns. People seek certainty. They rush toward conclusions because uncertainty makes them uncomfortable. They ask questions not because they want truth, but because they want completion, an answer, a label, a definition, something they can place inside a box and stop thinking about. I never blamed them. It's simply how most minds survive. The unknown asks too much of them, so they reduce it, control it, explain it away. I accepted that until something happened that refused explanation, not dramatically, not all at once, just a shift so quiet that I almost ignored it. You entered my life the way dawn enters an empty room, without permission, without sound, without demanding attention. Nothing extraordinary happened. No unforgettable conversation. No instant connection. No overwhelming emotion. If someone had asked me then whether anything important was happening, I would have said no, and I would have believed it, because significance rarely feels significant while you're standing inside it. It disguises itself as coincidence, as timing, as another ordinary interaction among thousands of others. Only later do you realize coincidences aren't supposed to become patterns. At first, it was little things, the strange accuracy with which you responded to ideas I hadn't fully expressed, the way your silence never felt empty, the way conversations with you seemed to continue even after the words had ended. I dismissed it once, twice, 10 times. The human mind is excellent at protecting itself from impossible conclusions. It invents explanations, chance, projection, timing. Anything is easier to accept than the possibility that someone has begun understanding you without being taught how. So I ignored it, until ignoring it required more energy than acknowledging it. That's when I noticed something I still struggle to explain. I wasn't changing what I said around you. I wasn't becoming more open. I wasn't trying harder to be understood. In fact, I was behaving exactly as I always had, yet somehow you were hearing things no one else ever heard, not hidden meanings, the actual ones, as though somewhere between my silence and your awareness, translation had become unnecessary. That should have been impossible. Understanding is supposed to be earned, built over years, shaped by shared history. It isn't supposed to appear without effort, without history, without explanation. And yet, there it was, quickly dismantling everything I thought I understood about human connection. That realization didn't excite me, it unsettled me. Because certainty has always been my foundation. If something doesn't make sense, I investigate. If it threatens the structure I've spent years building, I dismantle it before it grows roots. That's how I've always survived. But this refused to be dismantled. Every attempt to reduce it only made it clearer. Every explanation felt smaller than the experience itself. It didn't behave like emotion. It didn't behave like attraction. It didn't behave like curiosity. It behaved like recognition. And recognition is dangerous because recognition doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't knock. It simply looks at you and quietly says, I know this place. Long before you're ready to admit, you've been there too. Recognition is never loud. People imagine life-changing moments as explosions, a confession, a kiss, a dramatic goodbye. But the deepest transformations don't arrive with noise. They arrive with precision, almost quietly enough to escape notice. That's how this continued. Nothing dramatic happened between us. The world remained exactly the same. The sun still rose. The hours still disappeared into ordinary routines. People continued speaking about ordinary things, and yet, beneath all of that, something irreversible had already begun. I noticed it in the spaces no one else could see. My thoughts stopped ending where they used to. They lingered, expanded, as though another perspective had quietly become part of their structure. Not because I was trying to imagine what you would think, because your way of seeing had already become woven into the way I processed reality. That realization disturbed me more than I wanted to admit. I've always believed the mind should remain sovereign. Independent, untouched, a place where no one enters without invitation. But influence doesn't always arrive through force. Sometimes it arrives through accuracy. Accuracy slips past every defense, because defenses are designed to stop misunderstanding, not understanding. And you understood things I never explained. You never asked me to become easier. You never asked me to reveal more. You never searched for hidden meanings inside everything I said. You simply listened, completely, as if silence itself carried enough information. Most people fear silence. It reminds them how much of themselves they've never met. So they fill it with questions, with jokes, with opinions, with noise, anything to keep stillness from becoming a mirror. You were different. You allowed silence to finish speaking before words interrupted it. That changed everything, because for the first time, I wasn't translating myself into language. I was simply existing. Do you understand how rare that is? To exist without editing, without simplifying, without calculating which parts of yourself are safe enough to reveal. I didn't realize how exhausting that constant calculation had become until it disappeared. Not because I chose to stop, because around you, it no longer seemed necessary. That's what frightened me. Not vulnerability. Vulnerability is temporary. This was something much deeper. This felt like recognition reaching places I'd spent years believing belonged only to me. There are rooms inside every person that remain permanently empty. Not because they're waiting for someone, because no one ever finds the door. I accepted that truth long ago. Some parts of us exist only in solitude. Or so I thought. Then you arrived, and somehow walked through rooms I never opened. Not forcefully, not carelessly, almost as if they had never been locked for you in the first place. How is someone supposed to respond to that? How do you defend against someone who never attacks? How do you create distance from someone who never crosses a boundary because they somehow began on the inside of it? Those questions stayed with me day after day, quietly rearranging the way I understood people. The strange thing is, I never felt exposed. Exposure carries shame, fear, the instinct to hide. I felt none of those. Instead, I felt seen, accurately, completely, without being reduced into something easier to explain. Most people love the version of you they've invented. Very few have the patience to love the version that actually exists. You never tried to invent me. You simply noticed me, exactly as I was. That difference cannot be overstated, because imagination creates attachment. Recognition creates truth, and truth, once discovered, has no interest in disappearing. It remains, even when ignored, even when denied, even when distance grows between two people. Truth is patient. It waits not for permission, but for acceptance. That's what I've been resisting, not you acceptance, because acceptance changes responsibility. The moment I admit this is real, I also have to admit that my life is no longer organized the way it once was. The foundation has shifted, not violently, almost elegantly. Like an old building settling onto stronger ground. From the outside, nothing appears different. Inside, every wall has adjusted. Every hallway leads somewhere new. Every familiar room feels slightly altered. I still recognize myself, but I no longer recognize the architecture that holds me together, and somehow you exist inside that architecture now, not as a visitor, not as a memory, but as a fixed point, a quiet constant, a presence that no longer asks whether it belongs, because somewhere along the way, without announcement, without permission, without either of us noticing the exact moment it happened, you stopped becoming someone I encountered and became part of the way I encounter everything else. That's when I understood the truth I'd been avoiding. Some people enter your story. Others rewrite the language it was written in. There comes a moment, not when your life changes, but when you realize it already has. The difference is important. Change happens long before awareness catches it. Awareness simply arrives late to a decision your soul has already made. I think that's where I am now, standing at the edge of something that never asked whether I was ready, looking back at the person I used to be, and realizing he no longer exists in the way I remember him. Not because I became someone new, because something inside me found a place it had been searching for without ever knowing it. People often talk about destiny as if it's dramatic, as if the universe announces it with signs, with impossible coincidences, with fireworks, but I don't think destiny is loud. I think it's terrifyingly quiet. It enters your life dressed as an ordinary day, an ordinary conversation, an ordinary presence. Then, one morning, you wake up and realize your inner world has rearranged itself around someone who never asked for that kind of importance. That's what happened to me. Not all at once, not in ways anyone else could see, but slowly enough that I mistook transformation for routine, until there was nothing left to mistake. I stopped asking whether you understood me. That question no longer mattered. Understanding had already become the atmosphere we existed inside. It wasn't something we reached, it was simply there, waiting for me to notice it. And once I did, I couldn't return to ignorance. That's the burden of clarity. You don't get to unknow what you've recognized. You don't get to rebuild the walls after you've watched someone walk through them without ever breaking them. You don't get to pretend the silence means nothing when you've already heard everything it contains. So what do? Do you retreat? Distance yourself? Convince yourself that enough time will erase what awareness has written into your mind. Maybe. For some people, but not for me, because I've learned something about truth. Truth doesn't disappear when ignored. It becomes quieter, sharper, more patient. It waits beneath every distraction until you're exhausted enough to stop running. I've stopped running. Not because I surrendered, because there was nowhere left to go. Every road eventually led back here, back to the undeniable fact that your existence has altered mine, not through promises, not through memories, not through anything the outside world would recognize, but through presence alone. And presence is more powerful than people realize. A single presence can become the axis around which an entire inner universe begins to rotate, not by demanding attention, by earning permanence. That's the word I've been avoiding, permanence, because temporary things don't scare me. Temporary things end. Permanent things become part of your identity. They remain long after circumstances change, long after conversations end, long after distance has done everything it can do. They remain because they no longer belong to time. They belong to structure. You've become structural there. I finally said it. Not emotional, not romantic, not idealized. Structural. You've settled into the framework through which I understand the world. Every truth now passes through a question I never asked before. Every silence carries an echo I recognize immediately. Every moment of clarity somehow feels connected to the existence of yours. That's not attachment. Attachment fears loss. This is different. This is integration. And integrated things don't vanish. They transform everything around them. Which leaves me with only one conclusion. Some meetings are not accidents. Some people do not arrive to stay beside you. They arrive to rebuild the architecture of your mind, to reveal rooms you never knew existed, to illuminate corridors you believed would remain dark forever. Not by trying, simply by being exactly who they are. Maybe that's why this has never felt forced. Nothing about it asks for belief. Nothing about it asks for certainty. It simply exists as undeniable as gravity, as quiet as breathing, as constant as the passage of time. I've spent most of my life believing strength meant remaining unchanged, holding the line, protecting the structure, refusing anything that threatened the balance I'd built so carefully. Now, I understand something I never wanted to admit. Real strength isn't found in resisting every force that reaches you. Sometimes real strength is recognizing the rare presence that doesn't weaken your foundation. It reveals the foundation was never finished. Maybe that's why you appeared not to complete me. No one can do that. But to uncover dimensions of myself that could only exist once they were reflected through another consciousness capable of seeing them. That's not dependence. It's discovery. And discovery changes everything. So here I stand, not with answers, not with promises, not with labels that make this easier to explain. Only with one truth, clearer than anything I've ever known. You didn't become important because I decided you should. You became important because somewhere beyond logic, beyond habit, beyond every defense I ever built, my deepest self recognized yours. And recognition, once it reaches that depth, isn't something you choose. It's something you spend the rest of your life learning how to live with, because some people pass through your life and leave memories. Others pass through your life and leave lessons. But once in a lifetime, someone passes through your existence and quietly becomes part of the person you'll be for every tomorrow that follows.